Conquest of Cuteness. Jake is excited to eat an everything burrito he's created when he and Finn hear noises from outside. These noises are the Cute King and some of his minions, who demand that Finn and Jake surrender or die. Finn and Jake think that the Cute King and his army are too adorable to fight and don't think of them as a threat, so the Cute King threatens Jake's unattended everything burrito. Too nervous that it's been tampered with, Jake buries the food instead of eating it, staying up at night because he's paranoid about the cute army. These suspicions are confirmed when they see cute soldiers scampering about their house, making threats of invasion. The next morning, this cute army arrives and charges at Finn and Jake's treehouse, though they wind up routing themselves with various shenanigans. They see the Cute King crying because his army can't win any battles, so Finn and Jake decide to give them the win they want by inviting their friends over to fake a defeat by covering themselves in ketchup and surrendering. But the Cute King sees through this ruse, lamenting that he's even more of a failure and that cuteness won't get you anything. But Finn cheers him up by teaching him how to use his powers to manipulate others, starting with the Ice King. Not everybody is cut out to do everything, at least not in every way. The Cute King and his soldiers desperately want to be conquerors, but their combat abilities are severely lacking. Any attempts they make at fighting are repelled without the target having to do anything. Finn and Jake even struggle to fake that they lost a fight to the group, they're that bad at fighting. But conquest doesn't have to be done by the end of a sword. The Cute King and his minions were more than capable of scaring Jake into burying his burrito by manipulating him into thinking they'd actually done something to it. His ability to manipulate was far greater than his ability to fight. So had the king simply used the strategies best suited to his appearance, he could have achieved the end goal he wanted, even though he was unable to do it in the intended way. By the end of the episode, the Cute King does finally manage to make some headway in his conquest, not by fighting the Ice King directly, but by doing what he does best, being unassuming. Morituri Te Salutamus. Finn and Jake come across a cursed arena calling to them, recognizing that it's a trap that will force them to fight gladiator ghosts in order to leave. Thinking that this sounds cool, they go inside, and are predictably trapped and forced by the Fight King to fight gladiator ghosts who constantly apologize to their companions. But instead of being allowed to leave afterwards, they're buried in a cave underground to await their next challenger. Finn comes up with a plan to fight his way out by going along with what the Fight King says until he can escape, while Jake gets distracted and tries digging for lava so he can make a forge, so he can make a hula hoop, so he can become a hula dancer to improve fighter morale. Finn makes a fake Jake out of clay and ascends, fighting more and more of the ghosts as he starts to be affected by the Fight King's blessings, soon becoming bloodthirsty and craving more fight. Jake continues searching for lava while singing about tropical islands before emerging to the surface, where the Fight King orders Finn and Jake to fight to the death. Jake doesn't want to fight, but Finn keeps chasing him down, eventually demanding a larger sword so he can reach his companion. The Fight King obliges and gives his sword to Finn, who destroys it, freeing all the trapped ghost gladiators. Finn reveals this was his plan all along, and that he told a fake plan to Jake because he knew Jake struggled to stick to plans. The real thing that defines Finn and Jake's relationship is how well they work together without consciously needing to coordinate. Both of them see a cursed arena, identify it as such, and then agree to run inside without having to say their plan. Both are content that whatever happens inside they'll be able to escape together, and both are correct. Finn's acting likely would have confused Jake if he had been above ground for the duration of the plan, but rather than deriding the guy for always messing things up, Finn instead figures out a way to work his brother's behavior into the strategy. True friendships aren't about forcing the other person to be more like you, or changing yourself to be more like them, but about acknowledging their strengths as well as their weaknesses and working around those together. Memory of a memory. Finn and Jake are told by Marcelline's spirit wizard that she's in danger because she hit herself with a sleep spell and can't wake up. They're told they need to go into her memories to retrieve the moment where she cast the spell on herself so they can erase it and she'll be awake. Finn's given a magic mark to let him know which memory is the right one, and they get sent inside her mind. There, they see Marcelline as a child in a rundown shack fixing a teddy bear. they see Marceline's father eating her fries, and they watch her move into their treehouse with the wizard named Ash. They finally close in on the memory, just beyond one where Marcelline breaks up with Ash for selling her childhood teddy bear to buy a magic wand. Finn and Jake leave, giving the memory to the wizard, who reveals himself as Ash, Marceline's current boyfriend, because Finn removed the memory of the two breaking up. Ash and Marcelline leave, with Jake following them with his nose, where they come up with a plan to give Marcelline her memory back. Using Jake as a distraction, Finn sneaks into Ash's house and uses some of the leftover magic they used to enter Marcy's mind to go into Finn's. After seeing Finn singing the Buff Baby song, Marcelline is shown Finn's memory of Marceline's memory of Ash selling the teddy bear. They leave Finn's mind, where Marcelline greets Ash on his way back from Jake's distraction, where she immediately attacks him. This episode dives a bit into Marceline's past, ostensibly to explain a previously unheard-of relationship which she had with Ash, though he is far less important than the real glimpse we see of Ooh in her earliest memories. The setting itself seems to be a character, just one who's mostly had its development in the past, as we see that long ago, the world had far more shattered glass and moss-covered vehicles. Marcelline holds little attachment to so much in the world due to having seen it all destroyed before, her childhood, or what could be considered a childhood, being one of very little material resources. Suddenly, the angst of her father eating her fries holds a lot more weight, considering they were eaten in a destroyed diner. A few more looks at her memory are given, like her moving into Finn and Jake's treehouse before they were there, and the fact that she once had a relationship with a man who she never mentions. Of course, she has good reason for not mentioning him, as he also hurt her by giving away a teddy bear, specifically because it had sentimental value. So the two most traumatic events we've seen from her thus far involve her personal affects being taken away, though there's still a little bit we can infer, such as the fact that she owns a couch that's too hard to sit on because she floats. A few of the items she has are just things for the sake of having things. Because she grew up with so little, she compensates by being the type to never throw anything out, even if it is functionally useless to her, like fries that don't even have red color, and furniture she never uses. They're hers, and that's far more important than what they can do. Hitman. The Ice King is trying to kidnap the Breakfast Princess with a love potion he mixed into honey, so she calls Finn and Jake to take care of him, which they do by grounding the Ice King. Upset that Finn and Jake grounded him, the Ice King hires a hitman to hit the duo, thinking that this is a literal statement. This hitman, the Scorcher, arrives and signs a contract with the Ice King, and then proceeds to try to burn down Finn and Jake's treehouse. The Ice King puts out the fire but is caught by Finn and Jake, who are too busy being horrified by considering the implications of eating Meatman. When the Scorcher tries consuming the duo in black smoke, only for the Ice King to blow it all away, the Ice King realizes that he hired an assassin, and tries to bribe the Scorcher not to finish the job. This doesn't work, so he hires a hitman, though the Scorcher dispatches him as well. The Ice King distracts the Scorcher by claiming someone was hit in the boingloings, before freezing him and flying over to warn Finn and Jake. They're skeptical of the Ice King's ranting until the Scorcher arrives, chasing them away where the Ice King protects them inside of an igloo. He offers to lower their heart rate with ice to make it appear as though they are dead, so the Scorcher will stop chasing them, then does it anyway when Finn and Jake don't agree. At the end of the previous season, the Ice King was effectively replaced as the primary antagonist of the show, not so much because the Lich took that position, but because the Lich made the position far more respectable, to the point where the Ice King didn't really live up to that title any longer. He was never especially threatening, but the show didn't need a threatening bad guy. It needed someone who played off the main characters well and who fits the tone of the setting. Now there's a deeper undercurrent of a far greater horror beneath the surface, so it's hard to take the Ice King seriously anymore because we now have perspective of what should be taken seriously. The Scorcher is an antagonist who should be taken seriously, but the Ice King doesn't know this. To him, Adventure Time is still in its first season, and he's the big bad guy getting stopped by the heroes. When he hires a hitman, it's to hit man, because that's the sort of scheme he would come up with. It's all kidnapping princesses, but never murder. Through this episode, the Ice King isn't fighting against a hitman or against Finn and Jake, he is fighting continued irrelevance in the face of a changing show, as he becomes less and less necessary to the new dynamic that has formed since the pilot. Too young. Finn is on a date with Princess Bubblegum where he tries out a bathing agent that mostly burns his mouth. Then, the Earl of Lemongrab enters the castle, calling the state of the kingdom unacceptable, and declaring he is now in charge because Princess Bubblegum is too young to rule. PB explains that Lemongrab was one of her first failed experiments and that he is technically correct in taking over until she comes of age. But Finn's convinced that the duo can prank him into submission. These pranks mostly result in Lemongrab sending random people to the dungeon, but Finn's undeterred, ready to pour some of the spicy potion into Lemongrab's food. Lemongrab falls out of a window and eats some dirt, but ultimately recovers and sends everybody in the kingdom to the dungeon. Once there, Princess Bubblegum laments that she'll have to re-age herself to an adult so she can take back her kingdom, as once she does so, she won't be able to spend time being a kid with Finn. Each of the candy citizens in the dungeons offers a bit of themselves to PB, who then attaches the candy to her with the warmth of a hug from Finn. Once an adult, she fires Lemongrab and things return to normal, including the fact that she and Finn are too far apart in age to date. Princess Bubblegum used to be a title, just something to call a character to make her better fit into the setting. Adventure Time was about adventurers, and adventurers rescue princesses, not just random women. But now the title actually means something, as Princess Bubblegum has a kingdom to rule over and responsibilities beyond the very childish roles of having a good time. As the show matures, so too must the characters. So the princess doesn't get to stay as a little girl forever, and she has to move on from kids like Finn, and move on from acting like a kid in addition to being one. This isn't to imply that this changes for the worse, though. When the show started out and characters existed for individual bit roles, it was more acceptable to have them be one note. The princesses have the role of being kidnapped so they can be rescued. They had no characterization beyond objects to be won at the end of a plot. But as these characters return, they become more developed, and with these new developments comes an idea that they ought to get rid of those earlier objectifications. No longer does Princess Bubblegum exist so Finn can make the claim that he saved a princess. She's now a member of royalty, with the additional responsibilities of that role. Adventure Time is a show that matures along with its audience, so the characters have to move on from the very simple archetypes they began as, while the people watching these characters grow additional capacity to understand the changes. The Monster. Finn and Jake are given a message from Lumpy Space Princess's parents, saying they want their daughter to come home. They're given a basket of sandwiches to take to the princess, and they head into the woods where she's been living since last season. But before they can find LSP, Finn and Jake are stopped by the fat villagers, who are scared and hungry because of a monster that's been eating their food. Finn and Jake agree to help them out, only to enter the windmill where the monster's been sleeping, where they find LSP. She explains that after her parents tried to get her to move back in with them, she ran away where she was found by a pack of wolves. These wolves raised her as one of their own until she began to gossip about them, eventually being chased away where she came upon the village. Due to her disheveled state, the villagers accused her of being a monster, and she never corrected them as she could use the monster rumor to take their food. Finn and Jake ask her to apologize to the fat village, but LSP merely insults them and argues she did a favor by stealing their food. But when she realizes that the villagers have children of their own to feed, she agrees to give up her sandwiches and return home. LSP began the show as an entitled brat who feuded with everybody, something very typical of everyone living in Lumpy Space. After her introduction episode, the follow-ups all saw her living in the woods as though she were homeless, and here we get to see why. She moved out there intentionally rather than dealing with her parents any longer. While this seems like it's a sign that she's detached from reality and living in squalor as a result, it is important to remember that Finn himself lives with a dog in a treehouse. It's not unrealistic in the land of Ooh for children to survive on their own. It's only LSP who seems to be struggling with this. But maybe her faults are just because she is far from home. LSP is able to fit in just fine when she's around people who already accept her, but around strangers she's far less capable of adapting. The wolves only accepted her for as long as she stayed silent, but once she was comfortable enough to go back to her usual habits, they turn on her and chase her out. The fat village lives in fear of her until seeing the truth, content to chase her out with pitchforks instead of accepting an apology that, while sarcastic and full of her pausing to eat in front of starving people, is still far more than what we usually see out of the lumpy people. It's her parents acting out of character by sending an apology and some food while being a bit more heartfelt that finally grounds her not in lumpy culture but ooh culture, where she now has context for her actions being out of whack. Still. Finn and Jake wake up one morning to realize neither of them can move. The Ice King comes into their house and reveals he sprayed freezing potion on them while they slept, and that he intends to befriend them while they're frozen. He also brings along Gunter, who keeps trying to smash the bottles and gets kept on a leash. With his senses dulled from the potion, Finn tries to use his enhanced mind sense to project himself into the astral plane to summon an astral beast. So Jake is stuck trying to negotiate with Gunter to bring over the unfreezing potion bottle. The Ice King tries playing games with them like dressing up as each other, showing off his collection of penguin photos, and having late-night gab sessions. The next morning, Finn manages to make contact with his astral beast, which is a swarm of butterflies. He gives up on escaping, but Jake uses his mind powers to make the butterflies form a giant hand, which gives them the idea to use their newfound astral powers to force the Ice King to unfreeze them, bringing over a bottle and slapping him around a bit. But it turns out they brought over the freezing potion bottle and all three are frozen, as Gunter breaks the unfreezing potion. A bottle episode is an episode of a show that takes place entirely within a single location, done to save on set changes, costume changes, and to make filming take less time in the interest of saving money. At least, usually. While the bottle episode began that way, they are now frequently done as a challenge for the writers, or because staff finds a sort of plot device interesting enough to do it, without saving money, but because it makes a narratively interesting episode. Case in point, it's done in an episode of an animated series where it can't possibly save much more time than using existing backgrounds. This episode is a bottle episode in spirit, if not in practice. Finn and Jake are frozen, so they can't move around much or leave the house, giving them a reason to spend time around the Ice King because they can't help it. The limited scope of the plot is maintained, and whatever the writers couldn't normally do, like make mortal enemies spend time amicably together, is done. So interestingly, this is a bottle episode that actually takes advantage of the limitations to do more, instead of doing less, while still keeping the focus on characterization. And, astral butterflies. Wizard Battle. Finn and Jake are excited to watch the annual Wizard Battle, rooting against the Ice King as he plans on cheating to win the contest. But the prize for this year is revealed, a kiss from Princess Bubblegum, and Finn worries that the wrong wizard will win and take the kiss. So he disguises himself as a wizard and enters the contest, seeking out the least offensive wizard to help win. He discovers Daniel, a wimpy wizard who's expecting to die, and decides to help this man out. Once many of the other wizards take each other out, Finn uses Jake's powers to stop many of the obstacles before eventually taking out the Ice King by turning his weapon into a butterfly, then turning it back over his head. Finn forfeits the match and gets turned into a kitten, but when it's time for Daniel to claim his prize, his newfound confidence turns him into a jerk, and Finn starts to worry he picked wrong. So by sheer willpower, Finn untransforms and screams at Daniel so hard he dies. Finn gets shamed for using a power shriek, but since he has technically won the contest, he gets the kiss anyway. But Finn trips on his way to collect his prize, revealing the costume. Princess Bubblegum gives him a kiss anyway, but also slaps him for harming the sanctity of Wizard Battle. Finn is an archetypal warrior who does the archetypal warrior things, and so on and so on. I've started a few episode reviews this way already, so it's not new information. But I bring it up again because one of the things that the traditional idea of a hero is supposed to do is to protect fair maidens, and that's like medieval spelling fair or whatever. And Finn's target of affection is Princess Bubblegum, whose hand and lips he vows to guard against the wiles of the Ice King or some other random wizard. The issue is that this is an idea that originates from tales hundreds of years old, using ideas of chivalry that are also hundreds of years old. While being respectful is ageless, the coddling sort of manipulation Finn attempts here is not the sort of behavior that's looked well upon by modern audiences and writers alike. Basically, Princess Bubblegum knew what she was doing and had a right to do it. And in Finn's attempts to control her life, he wound up embarrassing himself with a shameful power shriek and ruined the wizard battle. It's not like this sort of action is all bad per se. In fact, Princess Bubblegum's able to recognize the intention behind it not as sinister, but because Finn cared too much. This is why she slapped him, but also gave him a kiss in the end. Also, when the wizards are told that the prize for winning will be a kiss from PB, the Huntress Wizard is among those celebrating. Fionna and Cake. Fionna is helping Prince Bubblegum prepare for the Gumball Ball, and he invites Fionna to go with them as pals. The Ice Queen breaks in and attacks the duo, freezing the prince in slush before Fionna is able to save him. Prince Gumball is grateful for being rescued and offers to go out with Fionna later that day. Fionna talks to Cake about this date, saying that it's just friends hanging out and it doesn't mean anything. But when she arrives at the gardens, Neil Patrick Harris' Prince Bubblegum gives Cake some catnip and gives Fionna a sword. They then fly around on their mounts, with the prince giving gifts to Fionna before the two are left alone on a hill where they talk all evening. Prince Bubblegum formally asks Fionna on a date to the Gumball Ball, and she accepts, showing up in a dress and everything. But as soon as she arrives, the prince takes her up to his bedroom, where Fionna notices the prince frozen to the ceiling, and the prince that she spent the day with was actually the Ice Queen in disguise. The two fight each other for a bit, with Cake hearing the commotion and getting the wrong idea. After Fionna is able to kick off the Ice King's crown, she's defeated. In celebration, Prince Bubblegum offers to date her, but Fionna turns him down, saying her real love is the Ice King, something Cake agrees with. It's revealed the whole story was actually fanfiction written by the Ice King that he's been forcing Finn and Jake to listen to. Fionna and Cake began as a few comics the character designer made based off of 4chan's Rule 63 thread for gender-swapped versions of characters. This isn't the first time fan content has appeared in Adventure Time, and it's far from the last. Entire characters and episodes are based off of sketches fans will do, and the way the show moves forward is driven as much by the creatives in charge as it is the fans of their work. That's to say, the two groups overlap enough that a reasonable take is that the biggest Adventure Time fans are the ones who work on the show. So the fact that the entire Fionna and Cake story in this episode is revealed to be fanfiction written by the Ice King is a fitting ending, as basically every episode of the show up to that point has been fanfiction of the series, which is basically just canonized as they invent it. A staple of fanfiction is taking minor details and fixating on them, which is basically just how plots are built upon already. Another is to ship characters incessantly, ignoring or rewriting details that make that weird, like aging up Fionna to be the same age as Prince Bubblegum so it doesn't come across as awkward. And of course, there's the self-insert character, which, as far as it's obvious, thus far really only consists of fill. Nowadays, Fionna and Cake is its own series, so anything I'd go into more detail about would appear in a separate video to be uploaded when it's done. What was missing? While Finn is admiring his secret wad of Princess Bubblegum's hair, a mysterious Door Lord appears out of a door from nowhere and steals it from him. He runs around stealing various other cherished items from Jake, Princess Bubblegum, and Me-Mow before appearing in Marcelline's house where they all catch up to him in a valley, only to be locked away from the last door. An inscription on this door claims that only a song from a genuine band can open it, so they get out various instruments to perform a version of Marcelline's I'm Just Your Problem, about how PB dislikes her for not being perfect enough. This nearly works until she starts to sing about wanting to bury Bubblegum, and the door shuts again. They try to figure out what's wrong with their music, with PB and Marcy blaming each other and storming off, as does Jake because he's pretending to be the band's jerk. As Finn watches them walk away, he begins to sing about how he doesn't want his friends to leave, and this begins to open up the door, as what it wanted was a genuine song from a band. Everyone else joins in with the door, revealing the Door Lord on the other side who, through grunting, explains that he took their cherished items because he wanted them to learn the real treasure was friendship. They beat him up and get their stuff back, finding out that Princess Bubblegum's item was a shirt Marcelline gave her long ago, and that Marcelline didn't have an item, she just wanted to spend time with her friends. As with the previous episode, this episode 2 shows how much of the show is influenced by its fans and their interpretations of events. Prior to this episode, the only real interaction we saw between Marcelline and Princess Bubblegum was a minor acknowledgement, as if they lived in separate spheres and never interacted much. This episode recontextualizes that relationship into one where they don't interact much because they don't get along. For them to not get along, there has to be some interaction between them in the past, And so an entire relationship is created through implication during this episode, that the fan community then decided meant that they used to date, as Marcy's song sounded like something someone may sing after a breakup. In the episode itself, the Door Lord steals several precious objects to the people of Oo, and while his intended lesson is that objects are just things and friendship is more important, the gang beats him up anyway to take their stuff back, because representations of things have value as well. Jake had a childhood blanket, Princess Bubblegum had a t-shirt from an old love, and Finn had a lock of hair from last season's episode to cut a woman's hair, which honestly was a little bit too Ice King for comfort. Marcelline had nothing stolen, yet she still went after the Door Lord when he ran by with the others, the implication being that her real precious object was Princess Bubblegum, who was stolen when her shirt was taken. Apple Thief. Jake cooks a Korean-style meal, but Finn wants apple pie instead. So they go to Tree Trunks' house only to see it's been ransacked, and her apples are all missing. As they're looking for clues that will lead them to the culprit, they see Raggedy Princess in a ditch, claiming she was pushed over by some ne'er-do-wells. Remembering his old hangout from his criminal past, Jake takes them to the Candy Tavern, where they make a mess of themselves to look like they belong, before asking around about apples. The barman takes them to an alleyway where a few apple sales are being negotiated. But instead of talking, the men rough them up while mentioning a rival gang's leader. Following a hint imprinted on Finn's face, they go to this gang's headquarters and lie their way inside, where Me-Mow leads them to an apple stash, only to reveal he was talking about diamonds, called apples as a street name. This scene erupts into gang violence, so Finn, Jake, and Tree Trunks sneak out and return home alongside Mr. Pig, who had been forced to eat rival criminals by the gang. Mr. Pig hears a stash of apples inside Tree Trunks' house, and it's revealed the apples were in her locked cabinet all along. Tree Trunks calls the banana guards on herself, but as she's being led away, one of the guards comments that her house could use a scarecrow. This causes Finn to remember the details needed to solve the mystery. He climbs onto the roof and discovers a nest of magpies, who have been taking the apples and dropping them into a hole. This convinces everyone of Tree Trunks' innocence. The last time Tree Trunks was on an adventure, she was woefully unprepared and held back the rest of the group as she got them into more trouble than the mission was worth. This time she is on a completely different type of adventure, one of a criminal underworld rather than fantasy overworld. She's not given major billing though, with a lot of the revelations instead coming regarding Jake, who apparently used to steal bikes and snatch purses for fun because he didn't know these were wrong. It's not really clear how intentional all of these gags are, however, as for a person with a long criminal history, Jake is hardly any more well adapted to the criminal underworld of the Candy Kingdom than Tree Trunks herself. Not that any of this matters though. The real culprit of these apple thefts was a family of birds living on the roof of Tree Trunks' house, which wraps up the episode nicely, so long as you don't ask who smashed up the windows in the first place, or who knocked over the Raggedy Princess to stop her from being the scarecrow on the premises. The fact that these apples have been getting misplaced for some time means that the hole in the roof has the same origins as the holes in her windows. Tree Trunks' house is in a state of disrepair, and she's hardly cognizant enough to maintain it herself, even trying to get herself arrested because she thinks she stole her own apples without realizing. Tree Trunks is a little bit senile, and no one ever really brings it up. The Creeps. Finn and Jake are on their way to a party they were invited to by a mystery host, where they're given masks and fake identities to don. Upon meeting the other partygoers, Princess Bubblegum, Cinnamon Bun, Lumpy Space Princess, and Me-Mow, they learn that the host is a ghost, who plans on possessing one of the partygoers and murdering the rest. Cinnamon Bun is the first to go, though Jake is convinced that his turning into a skeleton is just Finn's way of getting back at him for the events of Mystery Train. But Finn confirms it isn't a prank, and everyone starts to grow suspicious of one another, splitting up to find lights so they'll be safe the next time the lights go out. Jake and Me-Mow head to the basement where Me-Mow is grabbed by something, and Jake's screaming alerts the rest of the group to regroup in the foyer. Once there, they head together to the dining room and start quizzing each other on things only the real version of themselves would know. A ghost comes through the ceiling and melts Princess Bubblegum, And then Finn finds the bodies of Cinnamon Bun and Me-Mow in the closet, panicking before seeing LSP get absorbed by a painting. Finn and Jake make a run for it, only for Jake to get dragged away when Finn can't hold his gloves. Finn takes shelter in a room where a ghostly being pops out and surrounds him, escaping by smashing a hole in the wall. He runs up to the observatory where Jake pops out, riding on the back of Lady Rainicorn, laughing because he was able to counter-prank Finn's prank of luring them to the house for the murder mystery. Finn laughs it off, though when he asks about the mysterious ghost who was melting the walls, Jake says that was never part of his scheme, and Finn decides to store that memory in the vault. An episode that intentionally parallels Mystery Train, at first bringing up the episode as a way to remove suspicion that the whole thing could be a prank, only to pull a double reverse and reveal that it was a prank of a prank. If last season's mystery episode was able to play with the narrative tropes to come to the conclusion, this episode is able to use meta-narrative tropes to do the same thing. So instead of making accusations based on what it seems like an author would try to write, accusations are deflected by pointing out that this plot has already been done, and that's the real twist. They made this same episode 2 times. Mystery Train ends with Finn and Jake landing the train in a pile of gelatin, something not planned for that could have been real danger, to contrast the fake danger Finn believed he was in at the start. This episode also mirrors that by revealing the ghost Finn saw was a real ghost and not part of Jake's plan. This ghost becomes important later, much later, but for now it's just placed in the vault, where it doesn't get brought up again, Finn's way of repressing memories that might traumatize him. From bad to worse. While studying the zombie tissue left over from Slumber Party Panic, Princess Bubblegum turns her back for a moment and the flesh is consumed by Cinnamon Bun, who goes mad and starts infecting the rest of Oo. Finn, Jake, Lady Rainicorn, Lumpy Space Princess, and Princess Bubblegum barricade themselves in the castle, prepared to synthesize a new antidote using PB's notes from the last time this happened. But Princess Bubblegum is bit by zombies and pulled into the crowd before she can begin working, telling the others to just let science do all the work before she turns. They all flee to the laboratory, where they learn they cannot understand Princess Bubblegum's notes, so each of the survivors comes up with their own version of the antidote, briefly entertained by PB's dancing lab rat. Their antidotes don't work, giving the zombies wings, super strength, and sexy lips. And worse, LSP rushes outside to retain some of the lip potion while Jake gets bit, running away from the infection by stretching before the virus catches up to him and he turns Lady Rainicorn too. Soon it's just Finn left, who tries translating PB's notes only to get cornered and then barricades himself in the emergency shower. And then he notices that the candy corn rat's name is Science. So he lets the rat out of the cage, and Science proceeds to synthesize a cure, which Finn covers himself in before allowing the zombies to bite him. After a royal day of apologizing, Princess Bubblegum awards an honor to the hero who stopped the outbreak, her pet rat Science. A common way that Adventure Time builds on its characters and settings is by creating episodes that are direct sequels to other ones, not just an expansion of ideas but explicitly following up on the previous plot. While in the first seasons we learn that Princess Bubblegum does weird experiments on the Candy Kingdom with disastrous side effects, here we see that she continues the experiments without learning anything. Before, it was just a silly side effect of a serum she made that caused the outbreak, and it was dispatched with a slumber party and a game of playing with pretend piñatas. This episode takes the outbreak far more seriously, with more named characters getting turned, which is of course merely the result of the fact that we now have more named characters. The consequences of an action in a TV show are always proportional to the screen time of the characters affected by it. This is why we're less inclined to treat nameless candy denizens becoming zombies as a tragedy, but when Jake and Lady Rainicorn unite in zombiehood, it's something with far more weight to it. So it's a similar episode, but instead of the moral being about trusting your friends enough not to tell them your secrets, it's about the fact that maybe Princess Bubblegum should stop naming her pets after nouns. Beautopia. Susan Strong returns, asking Finn and Jake for their help. Jake's convinced that Susan is crazy and can't be believed, but Finn offers his assistance anyway, as Susan wants his hero's heart, and his red flower, which is fire. They return down the hatch where Susan and the other humans originally came from, where she explains that they once lived in Beautopia, but had to move to the sewers when they were kicked out by Lubglubs. She tries to get Finn to swim over there, but after holding him underwater, she learns that he doesn't have gills like the rest of the human tribe. So they take a boat instead. Along the way, she recoils in fear from a pool toy she calls a Lubglub, confirming Jake's belief she's just crazy, which does not help their faith when she charges through a few traps laid by the Lubglubs. They soon arrive in Beautopia, and Susan points out a large tower, saying they must bring the flower there. More pool toys float by, with Jake trying to pop one to prove they are harmless, only for the crowd to transform into shadowy creatures. Finn and Susan fight these creatures off while Jake stretches out to bring the fire up to the tower, tossing it in and lighting up the whole town, which scares off these shadow creatures. After the rest of the human tribe returns to Beautopia, Susan Strong tries to convince Finn to stay with her, allowing him to feel under her hat where he does not touch gills. In spite of this, Finn still returns with Jake. The last time Susan Strong appeared in an episode, she left Finn and the others at the end, returning to be with their own kind in the human tribe. This time it's Finn who leaves to be with his own kind, in spite of the fact that he's discovered he and Susan are similar in both being regular humans. Because while Susan was a human like Finn, she was still raised underground among the fish people, and thus she gets along far better with those types. When she's on the surface, she's afraid of everything just like her friends are. So Finn could have moved in with the other humans to be with Susan, but he never would have authentically fit in because of where he came from. Finn has more in common with Jake, even though he's a dog, than he has in common with a woman who barely speaks the same language he does. But it's not like they're totally different. After all the experience on the surface that Susan Strong got in her first appearance, she's developed a braver personality than the others in her tribe. The very reason she seeks out Finn is because he's as brave as she wants to be, and the fact that she's made a few trips to Beautopia to take it back from the Lubglubs in the past means that this isn't a decision she is making lightly. She tried and failed and realized what was missing from her attempts. And just because two people are raised differently doesn't mean they'll never get along. So there's still some hope of Finn reconnecting to his past through Susan in the future, just not in the moment. No one can hear you. Finn and Jake are trying to fight a deer who keeps licking the people of the Candy Kingdom when the deer breaks Finn's leg and knocks him out. Finn wakes up in the hospital with nobody else around, hopping into a wheelchair and carting around the empty city. He eventually finds Jake, who is rummaging around in the garbage with a bandage on his head, and Jake tells him to stay quiet, as it's his birthday, and he is waiting on a surprise party to be revealed. He asks Finn to gather some firewood for his hobo fire when Finn hears some whispering coming from a sewer drain. Jake stops him from investigating this noise, claiming he just has to keep waiting for the surprise party like he's been doing for the last 6 months. Finn tries to go anyway, but gets stopped by Jake, who ties him to the tent. Finn pretends to be interested in Jake's puppet show birthday celebration in order to be untied. Then he closes the tent over Jake's head, rushing over as Jake chases him, destroying his wheelchair and Finn's cast in the chase. Finn dives into the sewer where he discovers all of the Candy Kingdom citizens glued to the ceiling. Jake realizes what he's done to everyone else and goes crazy, though Finn punches the crazy out of him, and he helps get everyone down in time to learn that it wasn't Jake who captured people, but the deer from before. This deer stands up and takes off its hooves, ready to fight Finn, but Jake drops his weights onto the deer's head, and they push the unconscious body into the sewer. Sometimes weirdness can be used for humor, which is basically the premise of the show, and sometimes weirdness can be used for horror, which is basically the premise of this episode. Finn wakes up in a totally abandoned Candy Kingdom, only to discover Jake acting oddly, and not the usual sort of oddness Jake is typically known for. Remember, this was a guy whose reaction to being trapped in an arena was to forge a hula hoop. Characters acting bizarre and out of character can be considered unnerving, but what's more unnerving is when they act bizarre and in character. So when it's implied that Jake did something to the rest of the Candy Kingdom, this could just be a part of a scheme of his that doesn't make any sense, combined with the brain damage he suffered, making him less predictable. Most of the cast of Adventure Time has the ability to be pretty horrifying, they simply never use their abilities this way. A deer taking off its hooves and wiggling its fingers around menacingly is not out of place in the show, and characters made of candy being stuck to stuff isn't abnormal either. But by shifting the tone of the episode to more closely mimic popular movie scenes, these standard Adventure Time gags can become something else entirely. Finn waking up in the hospital is like the start of 28 Days Later. Finn breaking his casts is reminiscent of Forrest Gump. The episode title and ending with people stuck to the ceiling is a reference to Alien. If Adventure Time was just being Adventure Time, this would have been a silly episode. But by trying to be something else, it succeeds and makes the audience reconsider what Adventure Time really is, without the detachment of childlike whimsy. Jake versus Me-Mow. Finn and Jake are visiting the Wildberry Princess to eat her pies, and because she heard there was an assassin planning to kill her. She and Finn go outside to discuss safety, while Jake stays behind to eat the last pie, only to discover a tiny cat hiding inside of it. The cat, named Me-Mow, reveals she's the assassin, as, since her cover was blown, she's going to force Jake to murder the princess for her. She does this by climbing inside of his head and threatening to poison him if he does not kill her, or if he tries to communicate what's happening. After failing a fake assassination with a stack of meat, Jake asks Finn to play him their mother's lullaby on a music box, stuffing sausages into his ears so he won't fall asleep, but everyone else will. Once they're all out, Jake tries writing that there's a cat in his nose, but Finn reads cat noise and meows loudly. Jake throws him out the window and tries to pick his nose, but wakes up Me-Mow in the process, getting stabbed with the remainder of the poison for doing so. So Jake decides to assassinate the Wildberry Princess by pushing her off of a cliff while Finn has his back turned. But before he can do this, a bird flies by and sees the sausages in Jake's ears, diving towards him and knocking Me-Mow out. Finn sees the tiny cat and begins to battle her, but Me-Mow simply smashes the antidote bottle, bragging about having poisoned Jake enough to kill a dog 50 times over. So Jake shapeshifts his liver to be 51 times the normal size and is able to neutralize the poison. Me-Mow dives for the princess with a knife, but she explodes and the cat misses, falling off a cliff. In the end, Wildberry Princess says that she needs to be taken to the hospital, and everyone agrees about them all needing to be taken to the hospital. Me-Mow is a character designed by a young fan of the show, the episode's title card being the original drawing of this character, given a pass by the designers in order to make her more animation-friendly. As I've said before, that Adventure Time is a show that is as shaped by the fans as it is by the creators, and this is the most literal interpretation of that idea possible. A fan-made character being ascended to an actual villain. Again, this isn't the first time this has happened, just the first time it's been so overt. Anyway, Jake tries to communicate that he's being threatened by a tiny cat inside his head but can't get the information across to Finn, meaning that he nearly has to kill the Wildberry Princess before he can explain what's going on. What's funny is that he was fully prepared to go through with this assassination until overhearing Me-Mow talking in her sleep about double-crossing Jake and poisoning him anyway. Not really a heroic action, but Jake's never been that heroic on his own. It's always been his relationship to Finn that keeps him good and just, which is why it was harder for Jake when he realized he couldn't manage to get Finn in on it. Jake versus Me-Mow is a lot tougher of a matchup when he does not have his brother on his side. Thank you. The episode follows a snow golem waking up and eating his breakfast of a pear and some acorns. As he's run out of pears, he heads to the border of the Fire and Ice Kingdoms, passing by Finn and Jake, who are struggling against the Ice King's invincible ice armor. But a pack of fire wolves attacks him, with the golem fighting them off before grabbing his cart and leaving. But a small fire puppy follows him home, with the golem trying to stop the puppy from staying in his house by leaving him outside. But unwilling to let the animal be exposed to the elements, he lets the puppy inside where it spends the night. He struggles with trying to feed and entertain the hound, eventually planning to return it to its home when he hears the other wolves howling overnight. The next morning, the snow golem takes the fire puppy back, passing by Finn and Jake, who have started hacking away at the Ice King's armor. He crosses the fiery plains of the Fire Kingdom, melting more and more as he tries to reunite the wolf pack. A small amount of the golem is finally able to bring about this reunion, only to be scared off by growling. The ice golem, or what's left of him, passes by the finale of Finn and Jake's fight with the Ice King, eating the sandwiches he took while watching the snow golem, as the fire wolves return and allow the puppy to play with him just a bit longer. The hedgehog's dilemma is a metaphor in which two freezing hedgehogs, or sometimes porcupines, are cold and have to share body heat, though they cannot do this without the risk of skewering each other with their spines. So even though they both have an interest in intimacy, they cannot get close to one another without mutual harm. To be close to someone is to be open with them. To be open with someone is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable with someone is to invite harm. But sometimes that isn't so bad. Even if getting hurt is an inevitability, spending your life totally alone is usually far worse than if you were to spend your life with someone who could hurt you. And sure, some relationships aren't worth maintaining, but to discount every social interaction you could have for a few bad ones is far worse than the risk. The snow golem in this episode is living in isolation, getting the opportunity for some companionship by taking in the firewolf as a pet. But doing this means his house burning and parts of his body coming off. So he tries to leave it outside, but this means not just more isolation, but the knowledge that he could have had something better and was just afraid to accept it. So the golem lets the wolf inside and predictably gets hurt, but who's also hurt is the firewolf, who cannot live with the snow golem for long as he lacks a consistent food source and is at risk of freezing. Not to mention, he's far from his family and his other loved ones. So the snow golem treks through treacherous lands to find a place where the wolf belonged, really belonged, a place where he wouldn't be hurt just for existing. But when all is said and done, the snow golem and firewolf reunite, hurting each other, but doing it happily, since being apart is far more painful. The New Frontier. Jake has a dream where he is floating in a void with a banana man, a rocket, and the Earth. He runs out of oxygen and then gets visited by the cosmic owl. Upon waking up, Jake realizes that he had a croak dream, meaning he now knows how he's going to croak. Finn worries about this, but Jake says there's no need to, because rocket ships haven't been reinvented yet, and he doesn't know any banana men. Then the house is visited by a banana man. Finn tries to follow this man to his house to delay Jake's death however he can, attempting to scare him off by shooting flaming arrows into his home. But Finn misses, twice, and when he goes into the woods to retrieve the arrow he shot, he finds just behind the banana man's house a rocket ship, meaning that Jake's croak dream is closer to coming true than they thought. Jake is eager to embrace his death and climbs aboard, lighting the fuse and preparing for launch. The banana man comes out to investigate the noises and sees what's going on, warning them there isn't enough fuel before the rocket crashes through a hole in the ground. All three of them fall into an underwater lake, where Jake wakes up in a black void with a banana man, a rocket, and a model of Earth, as well as Finn. Remembering that Finn wasn't there in his croak dream, he swims to the surface to rescue his friend, who vows to never again leave Jake's side. Jake is more afraid of the unknown than he is of death, this fear coming from the fact that he doesn't know how he's going to die, rather than that he may. But once he has a prophetic dream, something he knows is valid due to the presence of the cosmic owl, Jake is far less afraid of death as it no longer can sneak up on him. He learns the circumstances of his death, then manages to relax as the fear of the unknown is now mitigated. He likewise is able to calm himself down with his belief in Glob. Jake will eventually become one with everything, and thus, there's nothing to be afraid of, as he's not losing his life but gaining a higher form of sentience. But that higher form means very little to Finn, as while Jake might be one with everything and aware of his brother, Finn will still be missing him. Jake isn't afraid because he has knowledge of his croak date, but Finn doesn't, and that's the real threat. It's one that Jake recognizes as well, as he stops looking forward to dying when he realizes it will leave Finn behind, alone and afraid. This episode also subtly drops references to Glob as more than just a replacement curse for characters to say to keep the show safe for kids. It shows that there's a genuine belief in a higher power from certain characters, establishing a silly planet as one with gods and kings. Holly Jolly Secrets. Finn and Jake are digging for some treasure that Jake buried a while back, discovering a suitcase full of VHS tapes. Finn recognizes these tapes from a time he saw the Ice King trying to dispose of evidence, and connects that they must have evil secrets on them. So they put up a series of posters warning people not to attend their secret screening of the tapes, then settle down with Me-Mow to see what the Ice King is plotting. But these tapes are mostly diary entries of the Ice King, retelling various exploits about princesses he's kidnapped that Finn and Jake rescued, while occasionally lamenting that he keeps doing the same thing over and over without any changes. Also a bunch of stuff they skip over about bathing in milk and being chased by squirrels. Assuming that the Ice King has been hiding evil messages in code, the duo calls Princess Bubblegum to help them to decode the messages, but the Ice King intercepts the call after he found from the flyers that there was a screening of his tapes. When he sees their screening without him, he blows icy wind over the field as the episode ends. And then, the next episode opens on the Ice King using his powers to see what these tapes are, learning that they're his, and that Finn and Jake are learning his secrets. So he builds an army of snowmen to raid Finn and Jake's house while they're bundled up from the snowstorm he caused. Meanwhile, Finn and Jake are trying to have Me-Mow read into any hidden messages he might be speaking through his sobbing, but they're unable to find anything meaningful, just faux interviews with the princesses he's kidnapped. The Ice King breaks in through their chimney and has the snowmen search through the house, eventually discovering the three of them hiding under the bed. After a brief scuffle, Me-Mow starts to play the final tape, one where a pre-war scientist named Simon Petrikov discusses an artifact he found, the Ice King's crown. He mentions how he tried the crown on and began to mutter incomprehensibly, scaring off his fiancée Betty before jumping ahead to where Simon's skin has started to turn blue while the snow outside his house is falling more heavily. As Simon starts to lose his mind while discussing the things the crown lets him see, he apologizes for any future actions he takes that could hurt other people, lamenting how much he wants Betty, his princess, back into his life. Seeing this, Finn and Jake give the Ice King his tapes back, and then decide to celebrate once a year by inviting people to their house to watch movies and exchange gifts by the fire, in memory of the time they felt a little sorry for the Ice King. At the end of last season, Adventure Time introduced the Lich, an event that escalated the stakes of the show to a point where earlier plotlines were now far less serious. This is essentially an inevitability with the direction the show's been headed in. When you develop the show by almost exclusively building off of the early seasons, you'll end up making characters more developed over time. Backstories are elaborated upon, and each member of the main cast winds up with more depth to them because, unless you're retconning an earlier story beat, that's just how linear time works. So with the show building on itself and characters like the Ice King getting left behind in the shift, it would make sense that he would steadily have to be rewritten or written out. If the audience can't take him seriously as a threat, why bother making him into a threat? Some aspects of this character shift have already been made present. For example, the Ice King has spent a few episodes already treating Finn and Jake as though they were now friends, acting like all the harms in the past, although the duo does not see it the same way. Here, the only reason the Ice King even bothers to attack is because he thinks that he's been robbed when he learns that they have his tapes. Before that, it was just a curiosity and a lack of control over his decision-making skills, something we've seen before. Last season, the Ice King managed to nearly kill Princess Bubblegum by dropping her into the Lich's well. He's foiled plans, both his own and those of other people, through sheer ineptitude, more often than not. His antics have been riding the line between silly and stupid for a while, and as Adventure Time has moved further from capital S silliness, they'd come across as less believable, even for a crazy old man. And so they made him into a crazy old man. The Ice King was not always the Ice King, he became that later on. Deep down inside, he's a different person, one you can sympathize with, even if you can't justify his actions. The Ice King might not be relatable or even a nice character, but the show's not asking you to relate to or like the guy. It's asking you to relate to Simon Petrikov, or anyone who's ever known a Simon Petrikov. He's stealing princesses to replace a princess he lost, and he lacks the wherewithal to realize there's a distinction between her and everyone else now. So as Adventure Time moves into its later seasons, the show takes on a new tone, and anything that doesn't fit is either quietly forgotten about or changed to adapt. The Ice King is no longer a villain you can root against, so why not make him a tragic character who you can root for? Marcelline's Closet. Marcelline has invited Finn and Jake over for a jam session, but when they get to her house, she's away, with a sign warning them not to enter. While waiting for her to return, Finn and Jake play a variant of hide and seek, but while looking for a place to hide, Jake goes inside her home. Finn enters as well when trying to get Jake out of there, but then Marcelline returns. They hide in her closet, hoping not to get caught, as Marcelline starts recording diary entries and picking her nose. They plan to escape by throwing a paper airplane with the letter on it, but it falls into a trash can just after it prepared some eggs. Jake tries tunneling out of the closet, but finds a spider in the wall, which leaps out of the closet and breaks a lamp, causing Marcelline to get her broom from the closet to sweep it up. When she floats into her bathroom to clean off afterwards, Finn and Jake use this chance to leave, but Finn stumbles into her bathroom while she's undressing and panics, entering the closet again. Finally, Marcelline falls asleep and they use this as a chance to leave, avoiding screaming when a spider bites Jake before Finn whispers loudly enough to wake her up. Their disguises don't work, because Jake shapeshifted into Finn, and Marcelline demands to know what they're doing. Finn and Jake apologize for entering her house while she was gone, but Marceline's okay with it, as she creeps in their house all the time. In the end, Finn lies in bed, now self-conscious about scratching himself. Marcelline has been shown to hang out inside of Finn and Jake's house without them knowing before, not just in Evicted when she was first introduced as having lived there, but in episodes like Go With Me as well. So the fact that she was never really upset with the duo for being in her closet for the whole episode is, in hindsight, pretty obvious, only really made ambiguous because of how worried Finn and Jake were about getting caught. They got into their own heads about how important it was that they followed a sign on her front door that was also half shopping list. Jake even nonchalantly goes inside during a game and doesn't think anything of it until Finn starts to yell. It goes to show that if one of them had stayed calm and not let the other guys panic infect them, they could have just explained things logically to Marcelline. She is their friend after all, and what kind of friend would keep their boundaries so rigid as to not let other friends into their house? Sure, boundaries are important for a person to have, but the point of relationships is that you make a second set of boundaries for the other people. If two strangers had walked into Marcelline's front door, they probably would have gotten into far more trouble. The fact that Finn and Jake looked at least a little bit apologetic about breaking and entering likely helped too, as it shows that they understood the boundary, even if they didn't respect it. Paper Pete. Jake is in the Turtle Princess's library, reading a large tome on the history and culture of rainicorns so he can better understand his future children. But Finn is bored, so he wanders around the library looking for adventure, but mostly he is shushed by the turtles around him. Finn soon finds some damaged books and uncovers the Pagelings, who ask him for assistance in a battle against the Moldos, threatening to attack the whole library. Finn tries to recruit Jake to assist in the battle, but Jake tunes him out so he can focus on reading. After blowing away some of the Moldos during a skirmish, Finn follows the fleeing mold into their lair where he gets an idea, faking as though he's going to double-cross the Pagelings so he can grab a bunch of Moldos and take them to Jake. He dumps the creatures on Jake's head, causing him to writhe in agony at the stinging sensation of their bites. He tries swatting the creatures off of Jake with a book, then notices two of the creatures eating his shirt. Realizing that Moldos prefer the taste of cloth to the taste of books and people, Finn offers his shirt to them in exchange for peace with the Pagelings. The two walk home as Jake admits he didn't actually learn anything about rainicorns because he couldn't get past the first paragraph, vowing to simply fake understanding in the future. Jake accuses Finn of going out of his way to find problems in this episode, trying to read a book in peace while Finn keeps agitating the other patrons of the Turtle Princess's library because he cannot sit still for very long. And Jake is somewhat right, as Finn spends far more time trying to prove to Jake that there are adventures out there that he doesn't stop to consider whether it's worthwhile to actually share them. He sides with the Pagelings against the Moldos, then proceeds to wipe out a group of Moldos by yawning too loud. It wasn't a very exciting adventure, nor was it especially difficult to complete, and yet Finn agitated the conflict by spending more of his effort on showing off he found an adventure than it would have taken to just stomp on a few mold spores. If his desire to adventure was really about saving the day and doing capital G good, then Finn would have very easily solved the problem of the Pagelings versus Moldos, but Finn's original goal was to pass the time because he was bored. He acts fairly convincingly like someone with an attention regulatory disorder. Finn needs something to be occupying him at all times, and if it isn't interesting, he can't focus. It's not to say that Finn never focuses, just that he has very little ability to maintain it on certain things. Large projects go uncompleted, but a bunch of little ones are far easier, like scheming to get Jake to see the tiny men living in the library, rather than just yawning them all away. Another way. Finn and Jake are stuck at home with a bunch of clown nurses that Jake hired to cure the toes they broke jumping off of birds. But Finn doesn't want to take the nurse's prescribed treatment of toe kisses, and he reads in the Enchiridion that there's a way to cure any malady with the tears of a cyclops. So Finn sets out to heal himself his own way, first encountering a split in the path where a talking stump makes him choose between a path that makes his hair fall out and one that will make him smell weird forever. Finn chooses his own way and shuffles through a bunch of thorn bushes, coming across a bush that warns him there's no way to cross an acidic river full of electric eels. But Finn chooses his own way and smacks the water away with the bush. He then comes across a man named Pan who needs help fixing his cart so he can give his wife a watermelon. But thinking this is another test, he throws the cart and crushes Pan's wife. He then realizes he went too far in going his own way and sings on top of a mountain, but the mountain turns out to be the Cyclops in disguise, and he proudly declares he will never cry for Finn, no matter how sad Finn's story is. Finn pretends not to care to lure the Cyclops closer, then punches him in the eye. Now cured, he lops off the Cyclops' head and carries it home, making the monster cry on all the people he wronged along the way before making it back. But Jake refuses the Cyclops' tears, preferring to do things his way, surrounded by clowns. Part of the reason that Finn sets out on a long journey while injured is because he values his own autonomy more than he values common sense. The other, of course, being that he is creeped out by clowns. As he goes on his journey, Finn is confronted by decisions he needs to make, continuously eschewing whatever binary he's given and taking a third, far worse option. When given an impossible decision, he goes on anyway, even though his methods are lacking. Finn even doubles down when crossing the river after he realizes that he made the first mistake, because it's not about the destination for him, it's hardly even about the journey, it's about the fact that he made a choice, and he wants the choice to be honored and acknowledged by the world around him. Was it a good choice? No, but that's not what matters. Finn eventually ends up hurting people this way, assuming that being nice was a choice and then choosing the opposite out of principle once again. His mistake was that, although he liked having things go his way, eventually doing whatever you want is going to stop other people from doing whatever they want. So it's selfish to keep making your own decisions on principle. The right way to live life is to make decisions that help the most people, yourself included. At the end of the episode, Finn is able to justify his selfish actions by turning them around, doing whatever he wants in the interest of curing everyone he hurt on his way to the Cyclops. Ghost Princess. Jake is disgusted by the softy cheese Finn is putting on their camping trip hot dogs when they hear wailing from the Ghost Princess, who says she cannot ascend to the afterlife until she learns how she died, though she has no memories of this. So Finn and Jake accompany her to the Graveyard Kingdom to investigate, where Ghost Princess meets Clarence, a gentleman ghost who defends her and shares his cheese poofs. While Clarence and the princess see a concert together, Finn and Jake go around the graveyard playing good cop, bad cop with the dead bodies, though they only find half a sword and some other junk. The princess returns from her date, saying she no longer cares about ascending, as she and Clarence are in love. Finn and Jake leave the graveyard as Jake shows off all the stuff he looted, and then Finn notices the half-sword has the phrase, "Rents" on it. They go back to Ghost Princess's grave and find the other half of the sword, containing the phrase, "Claw" on it. Finn and Jake warn Ghost Princess that it was Clarence who killed her, and she has a flashback of an ancient battle where the two lovers in life were on opposite sides of a war. Ghost Princess ascends, but Clarence is left alone on Ooo, complaining that his life is like a farce. Sorry, like a fart. Remembering this phrase, Jake has a flashback of watching a depressed Clarence eat himself to death on softy cheese, the reason he doesn't like it. And now, knowing how he died, Clarence is able to ascend with his lover. Back at the campsite, Jake agrees to try some softy cheese to get over his aversion. The Ghost Princess's goal was to rest in peace, something she assumed she would only be able to do after discovering her cause of death and making peace with that. But as Finn and Jake investigate, instead of unrooting her death, they found something for her to live for. Well, not live, but close enough. Clarence is a partner whose love found her across realms, even able to overcome whatever tragedy made them fight in the first place. When she was reconnected with him, the Ghost Princess stopped caring about her death because she had better things to do with her second life than worry. She found a way to rest in peace, it just wasn't by getting exactly what she thought she wanted. And then, she did get what she wanted. The irony is that Ghost Princess stopped caring about how she died right before finally learning, and that's what separated her from Clarence yet again. But just as they were able to find themselves in undeath, death is what brought them together a third time. Clarence, having a pathetic, albeit memorable death, is what allowed Jake to remember it, meaning that he could remind the ghost of how and why he died, letting him visit the Ghost Princess in the afterlife. Dad's Dungeon. Joshua, Finn and Jake's father, appears as a bunch of sparkles, leading the duo to a recording of him discussing how he has just died and left their inheritance, a sword made of demon's blood, inside of a dungeon he built for the two of them. But he also asks Jake specifically to go into the dungeon with the intention of having Finn do most of the work, because the whole thing is a means of toughening him up. The two find the dungeon nearby and go inside, with Finn convincing Jake not to fall for a trap involving food golems before making it to their next recording, where Joshua asks Jake to insult Finn and call him a baby. They make it to a room with an obvious fruit trap, where Jake does as his father asked, insulting Finn until Finn's depressed enough to eat the fruit on purpose. But Jake snaps him out of it, dragging him to the final room where they find another recording of Joshua talking about a monster he's going to have them fight, only to get grabbed by the monster mid-recording. So Finn and Jake rush into the room where they find this monster while it starts beating up Finn. Jake finds some of the unfinished recordings of their father where he admits the truth, and then Jake remixes them into a song, encouraging Finn to fight off the monster and claim his sword. The demon who made the sword briefly appears to ask for his blood back, but they banish him using a recording of Joshua banishing it before. Joshua is holding Finn and Jake as he's explaining to them the purpose of his dungeons, the two being tiny babies who cry a ton as babies do. In his mind, his son is still the baby he found him as, so his life's work of creating something that will toughen him up is something that winds up being a waste of time, as he ought to have spent the effort on his son in the immediate time that he had with him. Finn's dad spent so much time worrying about how his son would be in the future, he ignored how he was in the present. But Jake understands that Finn has matured significantly since they were kids, no longer singing buff baby songs, okay, maybe not that far, but certainly more capable of handling things in a rational way. Like when he encounters the ugly monster, and instead of trying to slay it, he just asks the guy to take a bath if he wants people to take his path. So all the toughening up that Joshua wants his son to do is toughening up he's already done. This means that the part where he orders Jake to insult him as a means of tearing him down is useless because he doesn't need to do that. The end result is that Finn is made to feel as though his maturity was wrong, and he falls into a depressive funk because all of the effort was for nothing rather than having a proper revelation. When you assume you know people better than they know themselves, you usually end up hurting them by being wrong, which says more about you than it does about them. Incendium. Finn acts weird around Princess Bubblegum as she is showing off her water-based pyrotechnics, then lies on the floor of his house, lamenting his one-sided crush with a song. So Jake decides to cheer up Finn by finding him a new woman to obsess over, heading out when he hears girlish screaming. These turn out to be from Flambeau, who, after being rescued, hears of Jake's journey and offers to take him to the Flame Kingdom because there's a princess there about Finn's age. He casts a fireproofing spell on Jake that turns him blue, and then they enter the Fire King's palace, where Flambeau tells Jake he has to act more royal, and then offer the king gifts. So Jake tries to produce something, throwing a water bottle at the jester and killing him, then performing Finn's song from earlier but with the lyrics tweaked to be about the Flame Princess. Finally, Jake shapeshifts into Finn, offering the Flame King a koala bear, but none of these plans work. In his confusion, Finn starts attacking Jake, and the Flame King is so impressed by the violence he agrees to let Finn date his evil daughter. Jake tries to back out of the arrangement because he didn't know the Flame Princess was evil, and him running away causes her to become enraged. The Flame Princess, assuming she is chasing Finn, chases Jake back to the treehouse where the Flame Princess's fire has spread inside and destroyed Finn's picture of Princess Bubblegum. But when it lights the water-based pyrotechnics from before, the fire is extinguished and the exhausted princess falls over. Finn saves her, where she tries to yell at him for what Jake said about her, only for Finn to say that he actually likes her. For this perceived flip-flopping, the Flame Princess slaps Finn, and he develops a crush. Princess Bubblegum began the show as a princess who needed to be rescued, whether from the Ice King or the results of her own experiments. But as Adventure Time has gone on, she has developed more of a personality beyond that, and this new personality is one that Finn doesn't mesh well with romantically. It's easy to project a relationship onto a blank slate, not so much a despotic candy scientist. And one of the last people to figure out this change in the dynamic is Finn himself, who's still in love with the Season 1 version of Princess Bubblegum. He hangs on to a piece of PB's hair because he's able to imprint whatever personality he wants to on it, but when they hang out in person, he winds up weirding her out with any direct romantic approach. So Finn is in love more so with the idea of Princess Bubblegum than with the woman herself, which is why the relationship is doomed even though he doesn't know it. Jake's attempts to find a new girlfriend for Finn end disastrously in this episode for the same reasons. He tries to fake a Finn to impress the Fire King, assigning traits that aren't there in an attempt to woo others. Even if his strategy had worked, it was still a doomed relationship because the Flame Princess would not be falling in love with Finn, but a lump of flesh attached to Jake. Interestingly though, the fact that a fake Finn has a bad relationship with the Flame Princess means the real Finn has a far better chance, like two opposites canceling each other out. Their relationship will develop more in later seasons of the show, but Season 3 wraps up with the two still in this initial shockwave of ambiguity.